because there was a lot of, even myself, I diss Nike pretty horrendous. I believe that the reason this took so long was because it was Caitlin Clark wanted it to be perfect.
Nike has had Caitlin Clark under contract for over $20 million, and they still cannot put her merchandise on a single shelf. That is the brutal, undeniable reality that the establishment does not want you to sit with for too long. Because the moment you sit with it, the moment you actually let that sink in, the entire narrative that Nike has been the right home for the most compelling women's basketball player since the era of Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, and Magic Johnson collapses completely. Caitlin Clark is the protagonist of the biggest cultural moment in women's basketball history, and for too long Nike treated her like a footnote in their own press release. But that era is officially dead and buried. Caitlin Clark just moved, quietly, deliberately, and with the kind of surgical precision that tells you everything you need to know about who is actually in control of this situation. Welcome back. This is WNBA Flash, and today we are documenting the exact moment Caitlin Clark's signature shoe era became undeniable and exposing every layer of what Nike's slow walk on the most marketable athlete in women's basketball history actually cost the fans who were waiting.
These are PFP for the former Hawkeye and current Indiana Fever basketball star Caitlin Clark. A shoe announcement could be coming sooner than.
Let me be entirely clear with you about what we are dealing with here. This is not a rumor. This is not speculation dressed up as reporting. This is a sequence of moves, deliberate, coordinated, perfectly timed moves that Caitlin Clark executed on her own Instagram page and that the basketball world is only now beginning to process. 2 days before the story broke wide open, Clark posted 2 words on her Instagram. 2 words. New era. Nobody caught it. The media scrolled past it. The analysts moved on. And then, within 48 hours, everything changed. She changed her Instagram handle to Caitlin Clark 1. She changed her profile picture to a teaser image, textured, layered, unmistakably intentional, that sent the sneaker world into an absolute frenzy, and a reporter covering the Indiana Fever confirmed in real time that a shoe announcement could be coming sooner than expected. Sooner than expected. That phrase is doing a tremendous amount of work, and we are going to spend the next 16 minutes making sure you understand exactly what it means and exactly what it cost to get here. Because here is what the conversation on television refuses to say out loud. The wait for the Caitlin Clark one was not a failure of planning. It was not Nike fumbling the bag. The wait happened because Caitlin Clark demanded that it be perfect. And in a league, in a sneaker industry that has spent decades rushing product to market and calling it innovation, that level of refusal to compromise is not just admirable, it is ruthless. It is the kind of uncompromising standard that separates icons from athletes. And it is the part of this story that the old guard absolutely does not want you to understand, because the moment you understand it, you realize that Caitlin Clark has been the one holding the power this entire time.
You got to remember, there's never been a basketball star throughout the entire league, I believe, that has been more engaging.
Let us go back to the beginning of this because the timeline matters enormously, and the establishment has been deliberately blurry about it. Nike signed Caitlin Clark to a deal that reporting suggests was over $20 million, a long-term deal. A deal that, at the time it was announced, made her one of the highest-paid women athletes in the history of endorsement contracts. And the public reaction was split. There were people who questioned why she did not go to Adidas. There were people who questioned the terms. But here is the thing that those conversations always missed. If you are a player who has worn a brand her entire career, if you are someone who has laced up that brand through the most important games of your life, you sign with the brand you actually love. You sign with the brand that lives in your muscle memory, and the reporting suggests Clark was a Nike athlete through and through, a Kobe Bryant shoe devotee specifically, which tells you everything about her taste level and her standards. She wore Kobe PE, player-exclusive colorways, throughout her time at Iowa and into her professional career. And here is the detail that nobody on the main sports networks bothered to amplify. No other athlete in basketball, men's or women's, is reported to have a larger collection of Kobe player exclusives than Caitlin Clark. Let that land. The woman who is about to drop her own signature shoe, the CC1, has spent her entire career in the most coveted, most limited, most culturally significant Nike subline in the history of the brand. She was not going to rush her own shoe. She was not going to let Nike push something out the door that did not meet the standard she has held herself to since before she was a professional. And at a press conference, she confirmed it herself. She acknowledged that the last pair of Kobe PE she wore on court would be the final ones, and that a new chapter was coming. She said it out loud. She planted the flag, and then she waited, deliberately, patiently, while the establishment got impatient. Now, here is where the accusation gets uncomfortable for Nike. Because while Caitlin Clark was waiting for her shoe to be right, another WNBA player's signature shoe dropped first, and the reaction from the fan base was visceral. People were furious, not because the other shoe was bad, but because the sequencing felt like a statement. It felt like the old guard at Nike was making a choice about whose story they were going to tell first and whose story they were going to make the fans wait for. And that anger, that raw, agonizing frustration from the Clark fanbase was not irrational. It was the product of watching the most marketable player in women's basketball history get treated like she was not the priority. Reporting suggests that if you walk into a major sporting goods retailer right now, you will find essentially zero Caitlin Clark merchandise on the shelves. Zero. The woman has a $20 million Nike deal and the stores are bare. That is not a coincidence. That is a systemic, baffling, catastrophic failure of retail execution by one of the most powerful brands on the planet. And here is the thing about that failure. It did not diminish Caitlin Clark. It made her fans love her more. Because every empty shelf was a reminder of the gap between what she deserves and what the institution was delivering. Every empty shelf was evidence. Every empty shelf was fuel. Now, I want you to hear the most important claim in this entire story directly from the source, because there has been a lot of noise about whether the delay was Nike's fault or Caitlin's choice. And the answer to that question changes everything about how you understand the power dynamics in this relationship. Don't take my word for it. Here is exactly what the source reporting says in plain language about why the CC1 took as long as it did.
Because there was a lot of, even myself, I diss Nike pretty horrendous. I believe that the reason this took so long was because it was Caitlin Clark wanted it to be perfect.
She said it with the cameras rolling. The reason this took so long was because Caitlin Clark wanted it to be perfect, not because Nike was fumbling, not because the design team was behind schedule, because the athlete herself, the protagonist, refused to let anything less than perfect carry her name. There is no spin to put on that. There is no alternate framing that makes that look like a weakness. That is an athlete who understands exactly what her name is worth, and who was not going to let an institution's timeline override her own standard. Caitlin Clark wanted it to be perfect. Let that sentence live in your head for a moment before we go any further.
These are PFP for the former Hawkeye and current Indiana Fever basketball star Caitlin Clark. A shoe announcement could be coming sooner than.
Now let us talk about what Caitlin Clark actually did on Instagram, because the execution of this tease was so precise, so layered, so cinematically deliberate that it deserves to be broken down frame by frame. 2 days before the story went viral, she posted 2 words, "New era," no context. No caption explaining it, no tag, just 2 words dropped into the feed of one of the most watched athletes in the sport, and almost nobody caught it. The media missed it, the analysts missed it, even the most attentive fans scrolled past it without connecting the dots. That is not an accident. That is a player who understands how to build anticipation. That is a player who knows that the best reveals happen in layers, not in press releases. Then came the handle change. Caitlin Clark updated her Instagram username to Caitlin Clark 1. Not CC, not a nickname, not a brand abbreviation. Caitlin Clark 1, the full name, the number, the declaration. And alongside that handle change, she dropped a teaser image, a visual that reporting describes as textured, almost snakeskin in pattern, with the CC logo rendered in a row, stacked, unmistakable. This was not a casual post. This was a deliberate surgical signal to every sneakerhead, every fan, every reporter covering the Fever that the era of waiting was over, that the CC1 was real, was imminent, and was going to be unlike anything the women's basketball world had seen before. And within 30 minutes of that post going live, a reporter covering the Indiana Fever confirmed it in writing. New Instagram handle, teaser profile picture, former Hawkeye and current Indiana Fever star Caitlin Clark. A shoe announcement could be coming sooner than expected. Sooner than expected. That is not hedging language. That is a reporter who has sources, who has context, who is telling you that the timeline has accelerated and that what you are about to see is not months away. It is weeks, possibly days. possibly before the 4th of July based on what the reporting was suggesting at the time this broke. I want you to understand the magnitude of what that timeline means, because the CC1 dropping before the 4th of July does not just mean a shoe release, it means a cultural event. It means a marketing campaign. It means every game Caitlin Clark plays in the back half of the season becomes a runway for her own signature product. It means every highlight reel, every 32-point game, every jaw-dropping assist, and we will get to her recent numbers in a moment because they are absolutely extraordinary. Every single one of those moments becomes an advertisement for a shoe that carries her name and only her name. The establishment spent months dragging its feet on this launch, and now the launch is arriving at the exact moment when Caitlin Clark's on-court performance is peaking in a way that makes every frame of footage pure gold. Nike, drag its feet. And Caitlin Clark is about to make them pay for it by being so undeniably dominant at the exact moment the shoe drops that the demand will be impossible to ignore. And here is the second receipt. Here is the moment where the reporter's confirmation makes the accusation against Nike's institutional slowness completely undeniable. Watch this.
You got to remember, there's never been a basketball star throughout the entire league, I believe, that has been more engaging.
A shoe announcement could be coming sooner than expected. That is a reporter, with sources, saying it out loud after Caitlin Clark changed her Instagram handle to Caitlin Clark 1 and dropped a teaser image. That is not speculation, that is confirmation. And the fact that it took a viral Instagram post to generate that confirmation, rather than a coordinated Nike press campaign, tells you everything about who has been driving this story and who has been sitting on their hands. Caitlin Clark drove this moment. Caitlin Clark created the urgency, the institution followed. Now let us talk about what is happening on the court right now, because the shoe story and the performance story are not separate. They are the same story. They are two chapters of the same book, and you cannot understand one without the other. Caitlin Clark is playing the best basketball of her professional career at the exact moment her signature shoe is about to drop. That is not a coincidence. That is a player who has been building towards something, who has been refining her game with the same perfectionist standards she applied to her shoe design, and who is now operating at a level that makes every single criticism the old guard leveled at her look absolutely ridiculous in retrospect. Let me give you the numbers, because the numbers are what the establishment cannot argue with. In a recent game, Caitlin Clark put up 25 points, 5 assists, and 3 rebounds. That is a complete game. That is a player who is not just scoring, she is facilitating, she is moving the ball, she is making the people around her better, and in the game before that, 32 points. 32, with 7 rebounds and over 40 minutes of floor time. That is not a player who is coasting. That is a player who is carrying, and in one single quarter of a game, Clark reportedly dropped 20 points. 1 quarter, 20 points, 5 rebounds. That is not a stat line, that is a statement. Now, I want you to think about the context in which these numbers are being produced. This is a player who came into the league as the most hyped rookie in WNBA history. She broke the all-time college scoring record before she ever played a professional minute. She came into Indiana under a first-year head coach in Christy Sides, and the first half of that debut season was genuinely rocky. The system was not right, the spacing was off, the team was not calibrated around what Clark could do. But then something shifted. The second half of that season, Sides made adjustments that were nothing short of remarkable. The Fever made the playoffs, and the conversation around Caitlin Clark shifted from can she handle the professional game to how high is her ceiling? And then came the Diana Taurasi situation. Let me be entirely clear with you about this, because the basketball world has a very short memory, and the establishment has been very comfortable letting this one fade from the conversation. But it cannot fade. It should not fade. Because what happened between Caitlin Clark and Diana Taurasi, one of the greatest players in the history of women's basketball, was a moment that defined exactly what kind of player Clark is and exactly what kind of environment she has had to navigate. The old guard tested her. The league tested her, and she did not blink, she did not shrink, she kept playing her game with the same aggressive, uncompromising, ruthless standard that she has always held herself to. That standard, that absolute refusal to be diminished, is the same standard she applied to the CC1. She is not going to let the shoe be wrong any more than she is going to let a veteran intimidate her out of her own game. These are not separate character traits. They are the same character trait expressed in two different arenas. And here is what makes the Nike institutional failure so genuinely outrageous. They had this player under contract. They had the most engaging, most compelling, most culturally significant athlete in women's basketball history on their roster. They had a player whose fan base is so passionate, so devoted, so hungry for merchandise that the shelves of major sporting goods retailers are empty, not because the merchandise sold out, but because it was never stocked in the first place. And with all of that, they still could not get the shoe to market before another WNBA player's signature shoe dropped. They still could not get Clark's merchandise onto the shelves of the stores her fans walk into. They still could not execute the most obvious, most lucrative, most straightforward marketing opportunity that women's basketball has ever produced. That is not bad luck. That is institutional failure. That is the old guard at one of the most powerful brands on the planet, being too slow, too cautious, too bureaucratic to move at the speed of a cultural moment. And Caitlin Clark, the protagonist, absorbed every second of that delay without complaint, without public pressure, without a single statement pushing Nike to move faster. She just waited, and worked, and prepared, and then, when she was ready, she posted 2 words on Instagram: "New era." And the world caught fire. Now I want to talk about the teammates and the ecosystem that is building around this new era. Because the CC1 is not just a shoe, it is a signal about where the Indiana Fever are going, and the people around Clark seem to understand that better than any analyst on television. When Clark's Instagram post went live, the responses from people close to the team were immediate and revealing. The energy in those responses was not polite congratulation. It was genuine excitement, the kind of excitement that comes from people who have been watching something build from the inside and who know exactly how significant the moment is. The Fever roster right now includes players like Kelsey Mitchell, Gabby Marshall, Brianna Jones, Justine Skinner, and Kay Martin, a young, hungry, developing group that is being built around the most dynamic playmaker in the sport. And the reporting around Clark's recent games suggests that the chemistry on this team is developing in ways that make the second half of this season genuinely terrifying for the rest of the league. Think about what it means to play alongside someone who is dropping 25 and 32 in back-to-back games, and who also has the vision and the passing instinct to find you in the right spots. Think about what it means to be Kelsey Mitchell coming off a screen when the defense has to account for Caitlin Clark's shooting range. Think about what it means to be any perimeter shooter on this roster when Clark is running the pick and roll and the defense has to choose between collapsing on her or leaving you open. The Fever are not just building around a star, they are building around a system architect. And the CC1 dropping during this stretch of the season is going to make every single one of those performances feel like a product launch event. There is also something that the basketball analysts have been sleeping on, and I want to name it directly because it matters for understanding the full scope of what the CC1 launch represents. Caitlin Clark recently started wearing a full leg sleeve during games. Now you might look at that and think it is a recovery tool, a compression piece, nothing more. But when you put it in the context of everything else that is happening, the Instagram rebrand, the teaser image, the new era post, the handle change to Caitlin Clark 1, the leg sleeve starts to look like something else entirely. It starts to look like the opening frame of a visual campaign. The leg sleeve, the shoe, the handle, the teaser, these are not isolated choices. They are coordinated elements of a brand rollout that Caitlin Clark has been architecting with a level of intentionality that most professional athletes never achieve in their entire careers. She is not just a basketball player launching a shoe, she is a brand architect executing a campaign. And she is doing it while putting up the best numbers of her professional career, which means every piece of content that comes out of this launch is going to be backed by the most compelling on-court evidence imaginable. Here is my verdict, and I want every single person watching this video to hear it clearly. Nike got lucky. That is the truth that the establishment will never say out loud, but it is the truth. Nike got lucky that Caitlin Clark is the kind of athlete who does not go public with her frustrations. Nike got lucky that she is the kind of player who absorbs institutional failure without making it a media story. Nike got lucky that her fanbase's anger at the empty shelves and the delayed shoe never became a crisis that forced the brand's hand. Because if Clark had been a different kind of athlete, if she had been the kind of player who uses her platform to publicly pressure her partners, this story would have been catastrophically ugly for one of the most powerful brands in the world. But she is not that player. She is the player who posts "new era" and lets the world figure out what it means. She is the player who changes her handle to Caitlin Clark 1 and drops a teaser image and then goes back to practice and puts up 32 points in the next game. She is the player who demanded perfection from the shoe without demanding anything from the public conversation. And that restraint, that absolute ruthless, deliberate restraint, is what makes the CC1 launch so much more powerful than anything Nike could have manufactured with a traditional campaign. Because now when the shoe drops, it drops with the full weight of everything the fans have been waiting for. It drops with the full weight of the Diana Taurasi situation, and the rookie season, and the playoff run, and the record-breaking performances, and the empty shelves, and the other players shoe dropping first, and the new era post that nobody caught until it was everywhere. It drops with 2 years of accumulated hunger from a fan base that has been told to wait, and wait, and wait, and that is now about to get exactly what it was promised. And here is what I am predicting, clearly and without hedging. The CC1 is going to be the fastest-selling women's basketball shoe in the history of the sport. It is going to sell out in every colorway on the first day it is available. It is going to generate a level of retail demand that makes the empty shelves of the past 2 years look like the most embarrassing institutional miscalculation in the history of women's sports marketing. And Nike, the institution that dragged its feet, that stocked zero merchandise in the stores, that let another player's shoe drop first, is going to spend the next 12 months trying to catch up with the demand that Caitlin Clark's fan base has been building on its own without any help from the brand. The Fever are going to be a playoff team this season. Caitlin Clark is going to finish this year with numbers that make the all-rookie records from her first year look like a warm-up. And every single game she plays in the CC1 is going to be a cultural event, a moment that the entire basketball world, men's and women's, stops to watch and process. Because there has not been an athlete in this sport, in either league, who has generated this level of sustained, compounding, escalating cultural gravity since the era of Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, and Magic Johnson. That is not hyperbole. That is the honest accounting of what Caitlin Clark has built, game by game, record by record, two-word Instagram post by two-word Instagram post. And here is the clip that nobody in the establishment wants to have to answer. Because this is the moment where the source reporting makes the comparison that TV refuses to make, the comparison that contextualizes exactly who Caitlin Clark is and exactly what Nike had sitting in their building while they were stocking empty shelves. There has never been a basketball star throughout the entire league that has been more engaging, more compelling. Never. That is the standard. That is the accounting. And that is the athlete that Nike had under contract while they were failing to put a single piece of merchandise on a shelf in a major sporting goods retailer. Let that sit with you for a moment. Let the gap between what that sentence describes and what the institutional execution delivered sit with you. Because that gap, that absolute, catastrophic, baffling gap, is the real story behind the CC1. The shoe is not just a shoe. It is the correction of a years-long institutional failure. It is the moment where the most engaging, most compelling basketball star in a generation finally gets the product that matches the performance. And Caitlin Clark, right now, today, in the middle of this season, is doing everything in her power to make sure the world is watching when it happens. She is posting 25 points and 32 points in back-to-back games. She is dropping 20 points in a single quarter. She is wearing the leg sleeve that might be the opening frame of the most important women's basketball brand campaign in the history of the sport. She is playing for a Fever team that is building towards something real and something sustained. And she is doing all of it under a new Instagram handle, Caitlin Clark 1, that tells you exactly where she is going and exactly what she thinks of the era that just ended. The new era is not coming. The new era is here. And the people who spent the last 2 years doubting whether Nike could deliver for the most marketable athlete in women's basketball history are about to watch her deliver for herself. Here is your forced choice for the comments section, and I want you to actually answer this because the answer matters for how we cover this story going forward. Do you believe the CC1 drops before the 4th of July, and that when it does, it immediately becomes the fastest-selling women's basketball shoe in history? Or do you believe Nike is still going to find a way to fumble the execution, even now, even with the Instagram rebrand and the reporter confirmation and the teaser image already out in the world? One or the other. Drop it in the comments right now. I want to see where this audience stands. If you are new here and this video found you through the algorithm, hit that subscribe button right now because we are going to be covering every single development in the CC1 launch as it happens, the colorways, the retail availability, the first game she plays in them, all of it. And if you have been here for a while, you already know that we do not do vague takes on this channel. We name the failure, we document the evidence, we defend the protagonist, and right now the protagonist is Caitlin Clark, and she is winning. This is WNBA Flash. Hit the notification bell so you do not miss the moment this drops. We will see you on the next one.